If you grew up in the 1980s Canada, you already know a truth most people do not say out loud. Our food tasted louder before the rulebook got thick. We drank colors and ate fats that would never reach shelves in the same way today. Then safety rules and health worries arrived, and whole groups of ingredients were checked, limited, or dropped. The brand names mostly stayed, but the recipes that made them special were rebuilt. Some products vanished. Others stayed in the aisle, but the version you loved was pushed out by new rules. These are the groceries Canada lost when the rules took over. The names may sound familiar, but the tastes you remember belong to another time. The first thing many people remember is the old Hostess chip recipe in those shiny foil bags. The crisps were thicker, the smell of hot oil hit you the moment the bag opened, and the flavor dust sat heavy on your fingers. That came from older frying fats and strong seasoning mixes that later had to change when rules around bad fats and some additives got tighter. The Hostess name was slowly folded into Lay's and the recipes were updated. Chips are still part of Canadian life, but the Hostess version that filled school lunches and hockey nights in the 80s slipped off the shelves quietly. The second item is Hostess ketchup chips as they were back then. Kids remember the deep red powder that stained their fingers in their school books. One small bag could leave red marks on your jeans all afternoon. That strong color and sharp taste came from bright dyes, sharp acids, and oil that later came under more control. When the company changed hands and cleaned up its recipes, the old mix went with it. Ketchup chips are still a Canadian symbol, but the wild, tongue-burning version you licked off your fingers in the 80s is gone. Another loss from that era is the original Humpty Dumpty Popcorn Twists. These light curls were at every birthday party and church hall in the Maritimes and Quebec. They melted almost at once on your tongue and left a salty film that made you reach for another handful. That texture and flavor came from older oils and flavor helpers that later faced stricter limits and changing tastes. When the brand was sold and folded into a bigger chip company, lines were cut and recipes were changed. The twists that sat in your packed lunchbox were part of that earlier world and did not survive the shift. McCain Deep and Delicious pies also felt the change. In the 80s, families did not just buy the cakes. Freezers held chocolate and lemon cream pies under the same name. The filling was thick. The top was a swirl of cream that stayed firm for weeks, and the crust broke with a heavy crunch. That long life and heavy feel came from fats and thickening ingredients that later had to be reduced. As rules around certain oils grew tighter, the company rebuilt its dessert line and focused on the famous cakes. The brand stayed, but the frozen pies many people remember from Sunday dinners were quietly dropped. The early Canada Dry Vanilla Cream Soda recipe was hit next. It poured into the glass with a soft beige color and a foam that stuck to the sides. The taste was so sweet and rich that one can felt like a dessert on its own. That came from a mix of high sugar and strong vanilla flavor that would sit badly beside modern health targets for daily sugar. As drink makers cut back on sugar and trimmed their flavor lines, this soda slipped out. Other cream sodas remain, but the Canada Dry Vanilla version from 80s barbecues and birthday parties is part of the past. Clearly Canadian, in its first big wave, tells the same story. Those glass, teardrop bottles of wild cherry, orchard peach, and mountain blackberry felt clean, light, and modern. Under that clear look sat sweeteners and flavor drops, chosen for that time. As people worried more about sugar, and as costs and rules changed, the brand fell out of most big stores. It has come back in a smaller way, but the huge end of aisle walls where sunlight shone through rows of glass bottles belonged to a looser time. Crystal Pepsi shows how short these windows can be. In the early 90s, Canadian fridges held a cola that looked like plain water. Kids loved pouring it out to trick their friends. That trick worked because the flavor system kept the cola taste while leaving out the dark color. It arrived just as people were starting to worry more about sugar, caffeine, and strange things on labels. Sales dipped and attention on these drinks grew, so Crystal Pepsi was dropped. Small comebacks have used newer ideas, but the version that confused your eyes and tongue at the same time is no longer an everyday grocery item. Beep juice cartons, especially in Atlantic Canada, changed under new ideas about what children should drink. Beep looked like orange juice, but tasted like every fruit at once, with a sugar hit that kept kids buzzing after breakfast. Its bright color and long life came from a mix of concentrated juice, added sugar, and keeping agents that sit badly beside today's advice on sugar and school drinks. As health rules and local guidelines grew tougher, beet was taken away, brought back in a lighter form, then taken away again. The orange carton on the breakfast table now lives mostly in memory. The Pop Shop crates and stubby bottles were also built on an older view of soda. Families drove to small depots to fill red plastic crates with glass bottles of cola, lime Ricky, cream soda, and root beer. The drinks were cheap, very sweet, and colored in bold shades because nobody was counting spoonfuls of sugar or reading warning labels. As big national brands took over and people became more careful about sugar and colors, the original Pop Shop company did not last. Later, revivals lean on the old name but follow stricter rules. The heavy crate you dragged to the car and the stubby bottles you clinked at the table belong to another set of rules. Maple Leaf Funwich frozen sandwiches show how views on processed meat and school lunches reshaped daily life. In the 80s, boxes of frozen ham and cheese sandwiches promised a quick, neat meal. They stayed soft for long periods in the freezer because they used strong keeping agents and plenty of salt. As worries grew about sodium, nitrates, and heavily processed meat, products like this made less sense. Instead of rebuilding them from the ground up, the company let them fade away. The idea of tossing a frozen meat sandwich into a child's lunchbox now feels like something from another age. The Walnut Crunch donut that many people link to Tim Hortons also changed when fat rules got tougher. Part of its deep taste and long shelf life came from older oils and coatings that later sat in the middle of talks about heart health. When those fats were pushed out, the recipe had to change. The donut left regular menus. A later short return used a different mix to fit the new rules. The bar that you remember as heavy, sticky, and slow to melt was built with ingredients that shops no longer use in quite the same way. Miss Vickie's early kettle chips, back when they were still made on the family farm, had a very different feel. The original recipe used peanut oil, which gave the chips a strong smell and a deep crunch you could hear across the room. As the brand grew and allergy worries and oil rules became more strict, a national product could no longer lean on peanut oil in that simple way. The recipe moved to other oils that were safer for more people and easier to handle in big factories. The Miss Vickie's bag you buy today still tells the story, but not with the exact farmyard mix from those first batches. Old blocks of hard margarine and baking shortening are another quiet loss from rule changes. In the 80s, many Canadian kitchens kept solid bricks of yellow fat in the fridge that could sit for a long time without changing. The firm texture came from oils that had been turned solid for shelf life. These later proved rough on the heart. Canada moved to limit and then ban this kind of fat in many foods, so those exact mixes had to go. The brands and boxes may look similar, but the spreads and shortenings inside are softer and built on other oils. The waxy, rock-hard brick your parents used for cookies belonged to a less strict time. Frozen French fries from that decade changed in the same way. Many brands partly fried their potatoes in these harder fats before freezing. This gave you a crisp outside when you baked them and kept them stable in the bag for months. When the same fats were pushed out of the food system, companies had to rebuild their recipes with new oils and methods. The fries in your oven today may be better for your heart, but they do not feel quite like the ones you remember tipping onto a metal tray on Saturday nights. The old, crackly shell was tied to ingredients that are no longer used in that way. Early diet colas in Canada also felt different. Some cans in the 80s used sweetener blends and helper ingredients that later faced tighter control or were swapped out. The sharp aftertaste and slightly dry mouthfeel many people remember were part of those older mixes. As rules changed and drink makers hunted for smoother, safer options, the formulas shifted. The cans still say diet, but the drink inside is not the same as the one you sipped straight from a cold vending machine on a hot afternoon. Smarties ice cream sandwiches from those years show how freezer treats changed. They were made of soft chocolate cookies with ice cream pressed between them and Smarties pushed into the sides. The colors stayed bright even after weeks in the freezer, and the cookies held their shape without crumbling. That came from thickening and keeping ingredients and color mixes that were later reviewed and updated. As rules and costs shifted, the product was dropped. New ice cream treats arrived, but the exact sandwich you remember leaving rainbow streaks on your plate did not come back. Laura Secord ice cream tubs in supermarket freezers tell a similar story. Flavors like maple, walnut, and French vanilla felt rich and dense in a way that came from cream levels, sugar, and keeping ingredients that were more common then. When the company turned more toward chocolate shops, and as brands thought harder about sugar, fat, and cost, the ice cream line shrank and left many stores. Other premium tubs now fill that space, but the Laura Secord cartons that sat beside the frozen peas in the 80s are part of memory more than daily life. Ketchup Doritos in their first Canadian runs also changed. The idea was simple. Take a tortilla chip and cover it with the same wild ketchup powder that kids already loved on potato chips. The result was bright red, strong smelling, and left a stain on your fingers that took real scrubbing to remove. That look and taste depended on heavy seasoning and bright colors that later faced more labels and more questions. The flavor was pulled, brought back for short visits, and pulled again. Newer versions are a little softer. The first version, that felt like a dare in a bag, belonged to a less careful time. Orbits, the strange drink with little jelly balls floating inside, shows how short-lived some experiments were. It arrived in the mid-90s from the makers of Clearly Canadian, looking like a lava lamp in a bottle. Kids bought it once just to see the beads move when they shook it. The texture and look came from gelling ingredients and keeping agents that made the drink feel more like a toy than food. As rules and tastes moved on, it did not fit what parents wanted or what stores wanted to stock. The drink disappeared within a few years and now lives mostly in old photos and dusty bottles on collectors' shelves. Even simple jelly dessert powders on Canadian shelves had to change. In the 80s, jelly for trifle or sundae dessert came in deep reds and greens that glowed in the fridge. Those colors often came from dyes that later faced tighter checks and warning notes. As companies moved toward different color mixes and lower sugar, the powders were rebuilt. The jelly you buy now sets the same, but the pale shades do not hit the eye the way the old bowls did. The bright shine many people remember sat on ingredients that are not used in quite the same way. Breakfast cereals aimed at kids also shifted as people looked harder at sugar. Little boxes and variety packs once held flakes and puffs so sweet they almost squeaked between your teeth. The crust of sugar on each piece came from levels that would not look good on many boxes today. As health groups pushed for less sugar in morning foods, companies cut back and some small cereal lines disappeared. Parents who swear the cereals of their childhood were sweeter are not just dreaming. The numbers on the side of the box really did change. Sherbet powder dips sold in Canadian corner shops tie up the same story. Children bought paper tubes or plastic pots filled with bright, fizzy powder and a candy stick to dip. The sherbet hit hard on the tongue and left a sharp burn at the back of the throat. That feeling came from older fizzy mixes and bold colors that were later softened. When makers moved to gentler mixes and clearer labels, the dips lost some of their bite. The versions sold today are fun, but the fierce sherbet from the 80s belonged to a different set of kitchen rules. President's Choice lobster crackers are one of the deep cuts older Canadians remember. They were lobster-shaped savory crackers sold in big boxes for holiday parties and family get-togethers. Part of their charm was the strong seafood taste and the bright orange color that made them stand out on a tray. As taste changed, costs rose, and rules about some colors and flavor levels grew tighter, the product was dropped. The President's Choice name still sits on many bold snacks, but the lobster crackers that once sat beside the cheese ball are gone. Many older Canadians also remember specific grocery store colas like Dominion Cola or other house brands from chains that no longer exist. These drinks were cheap, very sweet, and often stronger than the big names, because stores could push flavor and sugar without worrying much about long plans or image. The syrupy taste, harsh bubbles, and long shelf life were built on recipes that used lots of sugar and simple keeping agents. As big chains merged, small chains closed, and rules and tastes moved on, these house colas vanished. The idea of each regional grocer having its own loud, rough cola does not fit the market now. Rogers Video and other Canadian video store brands put their own logo on popcorn tubs and candy packs sold at the counter. The popcorn was often coated in bright yellow butter flavor and enough salt to make you thirsty for the whole movie. The candy used the same kind of strong colors and glossy shells as other sweets of that time. As people worried more about salt, fats, and colors, and as the video stores themselves closed, those house brand snacks disappeared too. Movie night treats still exist, but the tubs and bags with Rogers on the label are gone. All these stories show how different 1,980 seconds Canada was when it came to food. The rulebook was shorter. Companies could use stronger colors, harder fats, heavy sugars, and older keeping mixes without the layers of checks we see now. Families trusted the products because they had always been there. Kids bought them with pocket money and never read the small print. Nobody thought that one day the same brands would still be in the aisle, but the recipes inside the packets would be completely different. When the rules changed, it mostly happened quietly. A small line on a box might say, "New recipe," or "Now with natural colors." Some favorites simply vanished when it was easier to remove them than rebuild them. People kept shopping in the same stores and putting the same brand names in their carts. But over time, the taste shifted. Colors faded a little. Texture softened. Fizzes and crunches lost a bit of their edge. The food that built childhood in 1,980 seconds Canada slowly slipped away. So, when older Canadians say food tasted stronger and looked brighter back then, they are not wrong and they are not just being sentimental. They are remembering dyes that were taken out, fats that were banned, and mixes that were no longer welcome. They are remembering a time when supermarket aisles glowed a little more because the rules were looser. The company survived. The logo survived. But the versions of those foods that shaped their memories were taken off the market, and they are not likely to return in quite the same way.